Hello everyone, today I want to talk about the interface map and the class Hashmap that implements that interface. I already created a couple of classes. One is a book class with 3 member variables, a constructor, getter and setter methods for these member variables, and it also implements the hash code and the equals method. Then I have a class location that also has 3 member variables and the getter and setter methods for these. So let's look at a Hashmap object. I create a class called main. I generate the main method inside this class, and I create a variable of type map. And a map essentially creates a mapping from a key to a value. It has a lot of entries, always from a key to a value. So here my key will be a book, and my value will be a location. And since map is an interface, I create an instance of Hashmap, and with polymorphism I assign it to a map variable. So both of these are in the java.ute package. So I import this, import the Hashmap as well, and then I can start using my Hashmap. So important is that for the key or for the value you can use any class in Java. Sometimes you might want to have multiple values as a value here, so you could just define this as a set or as a list or even as another map if you needed to. So you really have a lot of flexibility with hash maps. In this case it might make more sense to use a set, since a book could be sold at multiple locations, but I want to keep this simple, so I remove this and just say one book is sold at a single location. So we can add books to it by calling the put method, and for the put method we have to provide the full entry, so a key and a value. I do .put. I create a new book object. Java is fun, and the location I type in just new location. I call the default constructor to keep this tutorial short and simple. I don't want to spell out the street, city, and zip code. And let's add another entry, calling the put method again. Create another book. Java is great. And this is sold at another location. So this is how I add entries to it. Now I can check if an entry exists by calling the contains key method. So map.containsKey. I pass in a book. Java is fun. And that will return true or false whether or not the book exists or doesn't exist in our map. So if I run this, this should return true. Now if you do this with your own class, this only works if you implement the hash code and the equals method for the key class, or for the class that you use as a key. So here in my book class I implement both of these. That is why it's working. So if you ever run the case where you feel this should be the same, you need to override these two. You should always override them anyway. It might work for some time if you use the exact same object and it just always happens to use the same reference. But if you create another object that has all the exact same properties, it won't all of a sudden work anymore. Another thing to point out here is whenever I call the contains key method, you see it is not, it doesn't check the type. So you can pass in any object, and this could result in an error very quickly. So if I type in Java is fun, it checks if the key exists. This will be false. Why will this be false? because in this case I pass in a string and not a book. You can see this is just a string, this one is a book. So that is why this one will be, I think I misspelled it up here, so let me just fix this. And then I run it again. So this will be false, since this one is a string. So always watch out what you pass in the contains key method. Then next, let's check how we can get a value by a key. So in this case, the value is a location. I call this log1 for location 1. And then I get it by calling the get method. And here I pass in a key as well. So first I use Java is fun. And this again, it only uses an object. So the same mistake that can happen here can happen with the get method. So always watch out for that. And I output this here. 1 is my log1. This should return an object. Now if I do this again, location 2, I call map.get and I check for a new book. This one is called Java is awesome. I output this one, the location. This should give me null. So let's run this. So this one actually outputted the location. I didn't override the toString method in the class, so that's why I get the address here. But the main thing is, here I provide a key that exists. It gives me the value for that key. So it will be this value here, because that matches the key. The second one, I provide a key that doesn't exist. And for any key where I want to get the value for, it still returns. It doesn't throw an error or exception. But it just simply returns null. So next thing, let's check how to remove an entry. We can do this by map.remove, and then we pass in the object that we want to remove. Java is fun. This is how to remove an object or an entry. So that removes both key and value. And finally, we can iterate over all the entries in our map. So the way we do this, I use a for each loop. And I use here entry, book, location. And one thing you'll notice, we have to import the entry too. And here we do entry set. So let's import the entry java.util-map. So one thing that often happens here is, remember you have an entry key value, and when you put just map, it doesn't work. So you have to do .entry set. And now the way to get these, so to get the key, we do entry.getKey, and to get the value, we do entry.getValue. And then we can do whatever we need to do with these. In this case, I just output them. And let's run this. So here we get the key and the value. I only have one left because I removed the book before. And similarly, you can also iterate over keys. So the one before, we iterated over the values, over the entries. So to iterate over the keys, we do again for each loop. In this case, we have a book as key, and we do map.keyset. and then we can output this one. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture and you have an idea now how to use hash maps in Java. Thank you for watching.